At 5:20 every morning, the coffee maker at North District Station made a sound like a man clearing his throat before bad news. I'd unlock the front door, kick pine needles off the rubber mat, and stand there while the old machine dripped out something the color of creek water. Then I'd drink 2 cups anyway. The station sat just off a county road that bent around the Manistee National Forest boundary, like it didn't want to look straight at the trees. 1 cinder block building, 1 equipment shed, 1 radio mast that groaned in high wind, and a gravel lot striped with tire tracks from trucks that came and went by routine more than urgency. From the road, it looked like nothing. From inside, it was where maps came to die and boots came to dry. My name's Jasper Duskwalker, and for 7 years, I worked that district mostly alone. People think ranger work is all rescues and bears and dramatic weather. Most days it's logs, signs, and reminding adults not to feed wildlife because they saw a video once and think raccoons are tiny exchange students. I'd check Trailhead kiosks for updated closures, swap out storm-damaged markers, clear branches, log washouts, record wildlife movement, and answer the same 6 questions in rotation. Any cell service up there? Can my sedan make that road? You seen wolves? Are there bears here? If I yell, will that scare them off? Is this where that TikTok cave is? I knew regulars by truck before name. Rust-red Tacoma with a canoe rack was Linda, retired teacher, hiked 6 miles every Wednesday, rain or shine. White F-150 with 1 mismatched door was Marty, who mushroomed legally and complained about out-of-state plates, like it was his civic duty. Blue Subaru with the dented hatch was a pair of nursing students who always started too late and came back flushed and apologetic. I'd wave, write down plate numbers for backcountry tracking, and pretend not to notice when somebody said they were just doing a short loop with 1 half-full water bottle between 3 people. My rental cabin was 15 minutes away, down a narrow road where the pines leaned close enough to scratch your mirrors if you drifted. 1 bedroom, propane heat that clicked all night, and a porch that listed slightly left like it had given up arguing with frost heave. I kept it simple. Cast iron skillet, 2 chairs, 1 good flashlight by the door, and a whiteboard on the fridge with shift notes and grocery reminders. The nearest real grocery store was 28 minutes on dry roads, 45 if sleet came sideways. I got used to stocking shelf-stable food and not letting milk expire. At dawn, I'd run the weather channels while eating toast over the sink. At dusk, I'd clean mud off my boots and fill out incident reports that almost always ended with no action required. It was repetitive in the way good systems are repetitive. If you did the same things right often enough, people stayed safe without ever noticing why. I liked that. I also liked silence, but back then I understood the woods' silence. There's campfire quiet, where things settle. There's storm quiet, where everything braces. There's winter quiet, where sound travels hard and thin. Nothing in those silences bothered me. They were normal. They had reasons. On off hours, I texted my ex, Naomi, more than I talked to anyone in person. She lived 2 counties over and worked at a clinic. We'd been broken up almost a year. Still not fully detached. The way some people keep old keys in a drawer, because throwing them out feels bigger than it should. You eat today? She'd text around noon. Define eat? I'd reply with a photo of peanuts and black coffee. That's not food park, man. You're not my supervisor. No, but your supervisor should be. At work, my actual supervisor was Todd Kepler, district lead, office mostly in town, visited our station twice a week if weather behaved. Todd believed in paperwork, liability language, and appropriate concern levels. He wasn't wrong often, just never nearby when strange things happened. Deputies from the county rolled through for coffee and gossip, trading stories about trespassers, dumped appliances, and drunk campers with fireworks. We all occupied the same jurisdictional blur: woods, roads, bad decisions. By late October, daylight got thin early and stayed weak even at noon. Tamaracks yellowed, maples dropped out, and the hardwood trails turned slick with damp leaves that hid roots like traps. The air smelled like wet bark and iron-rich mud. Hunters were active in legal zones, hikers fewer, and my logs shifted from family day use toward solo backpackers and locals with dogs. That's when the pattern broke. It started as one of those observations you don't log because it feels too small. No chickadees at Cedar Split pull off during first rounds. Usually they bounced through the balsam there like static and feathers, never quiet for more than a minute. That morning, nothing. No wing flick, no peep, no rustle except wind. I stood on the gravel with my clipboard and listened long enough that my own breathing sounded intrusive. Then a pickup crunched in behind me and I moved on. Because one empty patch of woods isn't evidence. It's weather. It's timing. It's chance. Over the next week, chance piled up. I checked a game corridor by Shale Creek, where deer crossed so reliably you could schedule around it. Fresh tracks usually stitched both banks in lazy arcs. Now the crossings thinned, then stopped. Instead, I started seeing beds in the brush near service roads, close to noise, and human scent deer normally avoid unless pressured hard. Twice I found us tucked 50 yards from active gravel, ears pinned back, not feeding. Coyotes should have been loud after sunset that time of year, territorial, calling in layers from ridge to ridge. I ran 2 evening patrols and got whole stretches of night with nothing. No yips, no barks, no answering chorus. Just tire noise on dirt and the occasional click of cooling engine metal when I shut down to listen. Then came the raccoon tracks. Near a muddy bend off an unnamed creek spur, I found a clean set, front and hind, clear pads, moving at a trot along the bank. 10, maybe 12 prints in sequence, then nothing. Not a turn, not a jump mark, no drag, no tree scramble. The mud ahead was smooth except for rain pinpricks. I crouched there longer than I care to admit, tracing backward and forward like I'd missed a page in a book. Tracks don't just end. I radioed it in as anomalous sign and heard my own voice sound thin and over-careful. Could be substrate change, Todd said later when I showed him photos. Could be overprint washed out. Late season does weird things. Substrate doesn't erase just one animal mid-stride. He gave me the look supervisors use when they need you to settle down without saying settle down. Log it. Keep to recommended loops. Don't go freelancing miles just to satisfy curiosity. I nodded like I agreed. Then I started walking wider loops than policy liked. I told myself it was professional diligence. Could be an untagged cougar slipping through and pushing prey, strange. Could be poachers running dogs or spotlighting where they shouldn't. Could be something less dramatic. Disease pressure, fungal bloom affecting forage, cascading movement shifts. Ecosystems twitch. People romanticize chaos as mystery when it's usually just variables interacting, so I collected variables. I set trail cameras at corridor pinch points, creek bends, and 2 old snow fence lines where movement funneled. I documented battery levels, timestamps, orientation, weather exposure. I checked for bait piles, snare remnants, brass casings, ATV incursions. I compared before and after maps from last season. I marked coyote scat locations and noted freshness. I measured stride length in deer prints near roads and looked for stress indicators in gait. Data calms me. It gives unease edges. But the edges kept moving. Bird activity stayed wrong. Not gone everywhere, but patched out in pockets, too sharply defined to feel natural. You could hear nuthatches, 50 yards one direction and absolute dead air the other. Rabbits shifted daytime routes toward open verges. Squirrels abandoned one stand of white pine almost overnight. Even the flies around carcass remains seemed delayed, as if something had disrupted their schedule. Deputies laughed when I mentioned predator displacement over coffee. "What, you got Bigfoot issuing eviction notices now?" one of them said. "Maybe Chupacabra crossed state lines," the other added. "Cryptid task force starts Monday," I said flatly, "because if you don't joke first, they do it for you." Naomi got the real version over phone one night when rain hammered my cabin roof and the line hissed. "I'm not saying monster," I told her. "I'm saying pattern shift. Something's forcing movement." "You've worked 6 doubles in 10 days, she said. "You're jumpy and underslept. Pattern shift might be your brain asking for a day off." "Maybe. Take a day off, Jasper." "Yeah." I didn't. By the end of October, my routine had acquired a second layer. The official one on paper and the unofficial one where I revisited sites alone after hours. I carried a stronger flashlight. I started checking my mirrors more on back roads. I kept the truck tank above half always. Tiny behaviors, easy to justify individually, harder to explain together. Then the camera started failing. 3 units installed the same afternoon with fresh lithiums came back dead within 48 hours. Not low, dead. I tested the batteries at station. Drained flat. Camera housings uncracked. No visible corrosion, no water intrusion. One unit had a faint burnt plastic smell near the compartment seal, like old wiring. I filed maintenance notes and replaced all 3 with new sets from different packs. 2 nights later, on a check near the old maintenance spur off County 17, I found camera 4 missing from its mount. For a second, I thought theft. People steal anything not bolted down. Then my beam found the mount still partly attached to the tree. Steel bracket twisted open like someone had grabbed both ends and torqued until metal surrendered. The bracket had been 6 feet up. I stood there in wet leaves, with my light on that mangled strip, and felt my body decide something before my mind caught up. My shoulders tightened, jaw clenched, breath shortened, shallow and quick. All the dumb animal alarms firing under a uniform and years of training. Could have been a person with tools, I told myself. Could have been leverage and a crowbar. Could have been vandalism by someone strong and bored. I swept the area for boot prints and found none I trusted. Too much old leaf litter, too much runoff. I did find one depression in a patch of softened ground by the roots. Not a print I could classify. Too elongated for bear, wrong toe spread for canard, edges collapsed by recent drizzle. It might have been nothing but soil slump. Might have. Dusk had gone full dark while I worked, and the forest around the spur had that evacuated feeling again, that held breath stillness. No insects, no brush movement, not even distant road noise, though I knew pavement wasn't far. I could hear my jacket fabric when I turned. I keyed my radio. North District, Unit 3 doing late check near 17 Spur, returning to vehicle. Static. then dispatch. Thin through terrain. Copy, Unit 3. Halfway back, I noticed the smell. Not rot exactly. Wet fur, old pennies, and something sharp like scorched sap. It came in a brief draft from uphill, then vanished. I stopped, listened, swept my light through balsam trunks and deadfall. Nothing. Just layered darkness and the beam-catching mist. Then from somewhere ahead and left, not close, not far, I heard one sound, a low, deliberate huff as if a large chest had emptied through clenched teeth. Not deer, not bear blowing alarm, not coyote. I knew those sounds in my bones. This was singular, controlled. Close enough that it had chosen to let me hear it. I didn't run. Training says, don't run unless you know exactly what's behind you and why. I walked back to my truck at a steady pace I did not feel, opened the door without taking my light off the tree line, and got in. Once locked, I sat there with engine off for a full 10 seconds, counting breaths, listening. No second sound came. When I finally started the truck, headlights washed the spur entrance and caught fresh scrape marks on the packed dirt, parallel grooves, deep and recent, angling out of the trees toward where I'd been standing minutes earlier. Something big had been there, within rushing distance, and I had never seen it. Something big had been there, within rushing distance, and I had never seen it. I kept the truck idling and stared at those marks until the beams made steam out of my breath on the inside of the windshield. Parallel grooves, each one too clean to be random rutting, too deep for branch drag, cutting out of the tree line at an angle that intersected exactly where I'd paused to check my map. I put it in park, grabbed my field tape, and got back out. If fear has a sound, it's gravel crunching louder than it should because your hearing is tunneled and your body is waiting for impact. I crouched, measured width and depth, photographed with flash, then without, then with my boot for scale. The grooves were fresh enough that the edges still held shape. No leaf litter had settled in them yet. I followed them a few yards into brush until they broke up in root knots and old tracks. No blood, no fur, no clear print. Just those marks and the smell. Faint now, like wet iron. Back in the cab, I radioed dispatch again. Unit 3, you copy? Copy. Documenting possible large animal sign near old maintenance spur off 17. I'm clearing area now. Need assistance? I looked at black trees and answered before pride could interfere. Negative for now. I drove slow all the way to County Road. Mirrors lit every few seconds by my own dashboard glow, checking for eye shine where there wasn't any. At the station, I didn't go inside first. I did a loop around the lot with the spotlight, and only then killed the engine. Inside, fluorescent lights made everything feel fake. Map pins, wet coats, whiteboard reminders about culvert inspections. I uploaded the photos and zoomed in until pixels bled. The marks still looked wrong. I opened a draft report and typed possible aggressive bear behavior, then deleted it. Typed unknown large canine. Deleted that too. Eventually, I left it as unidentified source scrape event adjacent to active patrol location. Language can hide panic if you let it. At 5:20, when the coffee machine started its throat-clearing racket, I was still at the desk. Todd came in around 8, jacket zipped, legal pad under his arm like it had grown there. He scanned my face first, then the photo series. You stay out there alone after dark again? He asked. I was on district checks. Off-hours checks, he said. Jasper, we talked about this. I pointed at the screen. Those weren't there when I parked. They were there when I left. And I had one vocalization at close range I can't classify. He rubbed his temple, the way people do when they decide how much of your concern is real and how much is management problem. Could be bear, could be somebody screwing with you, could be logging chain drag from before rain. Chain drag doesn't start 10 feet inside trees and angle at a person. Then a person dragged something you don't know. That's the issue, I said. I don't know. Todd leaned on the desk. Okay. Then we treat it as unknown risk and follow process. You log it, you don't chase it, you don't widen routes solo. You want to run extra camera units? Run it through me first. I nearly laughed at that. The cameras are dying in 2 days. Electronics fail. 3 from different batches failed the same way. Then we'll check voltage, check seals, replace mounts. We're not jumping to campfire stories. I never said campfire stories. He said it so I wouldn't have to. By mid-morning, I'd convinced myself the scrape marks were either bear claws in a weird approach pattern or human-made intimidation by someone who'd seen my truck and wanted me gone. Both options were bad, but ordinary bad. I could work with ordinary bad. I spent the day trying to prove one of them. I drove to the county garage and asked if any crews had dragged chain near the 17 spur. Number 1, I checked with timber contractors on permit maps. None had equipment in that section this week. I called a wildlife biologist I knew in another district and asked about abnormal biped impressions from black bears. Briefly upright, sure, she said, not sustained locomotion, not in a way you'd confuse with person unless substrate's terrible. What about scrape marks, parallel deep? Could be claws if it charged and braked. Could be rake from antlered deer if conditions line up weird. Send photos. I sent them. She replied 10 minutes later. Not deer. At lunch, the deputies rolled through for free coffee and took one look at my expression. Uh-oh, one said. Ranger saw a ghost. Got sign out by 17, I said. Large, close. You carrying silver bullets now? I'm carrying patience, I said. The older deputy checked the photos anyway, thumb hovering over zoom. He whistled once, low. Those are fresh? Yeah. Could be some idiot with a landscaping claw attachment. In the woods, at night, he shrugged. Idiots don't schedule logic. Then he handed the phone back and grinned so his partner would stay entertained. Still, if a werewolf asks, tell him county's out of jurisdiction after dark. People laugh harder when they're uncomfortable. I'd heard it at accident scenes, overdose calls, domestic standbys. This wasn't different. It still made me want to put my fist through drywall. That afternoon, I talked to regulars at Trailheads without sounding like I was interviewing witnesses. Linda, rust-red Tacoma, trekking poles already in hand. You seen anything unusual around Cedar Split? Big dogs, somebody camping off limit, animal acting bold? Just too quiet, she said. No birds there last week either. Felt wrong. Thought maybe pressure change. Marty, white F-150, mushroom knife on his belt. Found tracks I didn't like by shale. Not wolf, not dog. Could be blown out mud. I didn't follow. I'm not stupid. The nursing student's blue Subaru, same apologetic smiles. We heard something pacing us one evening, one said, then immediately downplayed it. Probably deer. We're jumpy. Don't start late, I told them. If you do, turn around early. Since when are you strict? The other asked. Since now. By dusk, I had enough fragments to keep worry alive and nothing concrete enough to escalate response. No prints with full toe clarity, no hair sample, no carcass with bite pattern, no witness willing to sign anything stronger than weird. Evidence in the woods is like smoke. Present, undeniable, impossible to hold. I told myself I needed one clean data point. That evening, fog settled low and dense, the kind that makes your headlights look like they're trying to push through milk. Cedar Split was on my way back, and I almost drove past. Then I turned in anyway. Tires crunching slow across gravel slick with damp leaves. Rational plan. Quick perimeter, verify no illegal fire rings, check one camera line, leave. 10 minutes. I took my one good flashlight from the passenger floor, checked my radio battery, and stepped out into air that tasted cold enough to sting teeth. Fog clung in layers between trunks, drifting waist-high in some places, shoulder-high in others, like something breathing very slowly across the ground. The first thing I noticed was what I didn't hear. No chickadees, no jays, no small claw scratches in bark. Even wind seemed to get absorbed and disappear. I walked to the kiosk, scanned permit board, no issues. Took the narrow approach toward the split where cedar gives way to balsam and the trail dips before climbing. My light cut a tunnel through white haze, reflecting off moisture so hard I had to lower the beam. That's when I saw the eyes. 2 points low to the ground at first, maybe knee height relative to me. Pale and steady in the edge of my beam. My brain filed raccoon before I'd even fully registered distance. Then coyote. Then deer fawn, even though that made no seasonal sense. I stopped and angled the light directly. The points held, white gold, not green, not blue. Too bright, as if lit from behind rather than reflecting front light. I took one step right for a clearer lane between saplings. The eyes rose. Not in a jump. Not bobbing like an animal standing from a crouch. They lifted in one smooth, controlled motion vertically until they settled at a height no deerhead reaches unless it's rearing, no bear carries for long, no person should stand in that pocket of timber at that hour without a headlamp and a reason. 7 feet, maybe a little less, maybe exactly that. High enough that my stomach dropped before my mind named it. I froze. Light trembled in my hand and the beam shook over bark, then found those eyes again. They narrowed. Not a blink, more like aperture shift. And that white gold glare dimmed a notch, then another, like someone turning down a dial. I could hear my pulse in my ears and the tiny fabric rasp of my sleeve against my vest. The rest of the forest might as well have been vacuum. "Hey," I heard myself say, voice too loud. "Who's out there?" No answer, no branch snap, no exhale, just those eyes, now duller, still fixed. I keyed my radio without looking down. "Dispatch, Unit 3 at Cedar Split, I've got..." I stopped because saying what I had sounded insane even before it left my throat. "I've got unidentified eye shine, possible large animal, no movement." Static ate half my transmission. Repeat? The eyes shifted left, a slow glide behind balsam trunks, then vanished as if the fog took them. I held the beam where they'd been and counted to 10. Nothing. Counted to 20. Nothing. I moved forward 3 steps, then stopped because every survival instinct I had screamed not to close distance into blind cover alone. "Unit 3, say again," dispatch crackled. "Negative contact now," I said. "Could not identify species." I backed out the way I came, never turning fully away. Beam sweeping arcs I knew were too fast for good search technique. At the truck, I locked doors before I sat down and only then realized my hands were shaking hard enough to rattle keys. I waited there with engine running, heater on low, trying to replay what I'd seen in a version that made sense. Could have been two animals aligned, one behind the other. Could have been moisture distortion in fog and beam angle. Could have been a person with reflective gear and a sick sense of humor. Could have been fatigue, visual misread, 6 doubles in 10 days catching up. I said each one out loud like a checklist. None of them fit cleanly. On the drive home, I called Naomi because I needed someone who knew my baseline, someone who could tell me if I sounded cracked. She picked up on the second ring. You okay? Define okay. Jasper. I kept my voice level. I had eye shine at Cedar Split tonight. Wrong height, wrong behavior. I challenged, no response. Silence then. Were you alone? Yeah. Go home, she said immediately. Lock your door, sleep. I'm not tired. That's not what I said. I laughed once, no humor in it. If I put this in a report exactly, I become the cryptid ranger by morning. Then don't put it exactly, she said. Put what you can defend. That was the most Naomi sentence possible, compassionate and practical at the same time. I slept maybe 2 hours, waking at every branch tap against the cabin siding. Before dawn, I sat at my kitchen table with the report form open and wrote, observed dual reflective points at atypical elevation in dense fog. No positive ID. Contact not re-established. It read sterile and useless and technically true. The next day, Todd called after reading it. Atypical elevation, he said. What does that mean, Jasper? It means I couldn't identify it. Was it human? Didn't look human. Did it threaten? It watched. He exhaled into the phone. You need rest. I need backup on evening checks. Pause. Paper shuffling on his end. Staffing's tight. I can pair you maybe once this week. Once isn't enough. Then keep checks daylight. By policy, he was right. By instinct, he was wrong. The thing, whatever it was selecting low visibility and edge hours. Daylight loops were hygiene, not solution. I kept doing them anyway because that's what the uniform required. I also started carrying the flare gun off shift. Not because I thought it was a weapon, because bright, sudden light can buy seconds. And seconds are a kind of currency you don't appreciate until you're short on it. 2 nights later, I was back out after dark. I told myself it was to verify camera 5 near the old snow fence line, where moonlight opened a clear slope and made for better motion capture. True enough. I told myself I'd go in, swap card, come out. Also true. I did not tell Todd I was going after hours because I was done hearing appropriate concern levels from an office chair. The sky was clear for the first time in days, cold and sharp. Frost silvered the grass along the maintenance path. My breath smoked in front of me and drifted sideways in steady wind. Visibility was good. Too good to excuse mistakes. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. I parked by the gated pullout, killed lights, and stood for a minute listening. Still no coyote chatter, no owl calls. Even distant highway noise seemed muted, like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I followed the maintenance path to the old fence line. Flashlight off while moonlight held, turning it on only at denser patches. The slope ahead was pale with frost, trees black at the edge, and there, right where open ground met timber, I saw it. Not eyes this time. A shape. A full-body cutout against the lighter slope, motionless for a beat so complete I thought it was a burned stump or torn fence post at first. Then it shifted weight and the illusion fell apart. Broad shoulders, narrow hips, upright. Not upright like a bear begging scent. Upright like that was its default. It stood with a slight forward lean, knees bent just enough to load power, exactly the posture of a sprinter waiting for the gun. My brain threw every file it had at it. Man in heavy coat, hunter with pack frame, wind-bent sapling, and rejected each one faster than I could form the thought. I raised the flashlight and hit it with center beam. Fur texture flashed in fragments, dark and uneven. Then it moved sideways so fast and smooth, the beam lagged behind. One stride covered nearly the width of the maintenance path. I didn't understand scale until that moment. Photos flatten things. Distance lies. But when something crosses ground in chunks, your body expects to take 3 steps to clear. Your gut does the math before your mind can deny it. I stumbled back, caught heel on frozen rut, nearly went down. The light jittered across trunks, found empty space where it had been, then caught a hint of mass between balsam stems farther left. Already reposition, already using cover. "Hey!" I shouted again, because language is what humans throw at fear when tools run out. "Stop!" It stopped. Not because I commanded it, because it wanted to. I saw the silhouette in profile now, head extended forward from shoulders in a shape too long for human proportions, ears or points, flattening back against the skull line. Arms, forelimbs, whatever term you want, hung low enough that the hands nearly met thigh midline even in partial crouch. Then it leaned, and for a half second I thought it was about to charge. Instead, it stepped backward into deeper timber and erased itself. No crackling retreat, no crashing through brush, just gone. I stood there with the flashlight up until my forearm burned. Then I remembered to breathe. My radio was in my hand and I didn't recall grabbing it. I thumbed transmit. Dispatch Unit 3, possible large predator visual near old snow fence line off 17. Upright locomotion observed. I repeat, upright locomotion observed. Static, then confusion. Unit 3, did you say human? Negative human. Unknown. Do you require law enforcement? I looked at black tree line and imagined deputies arriving with jokes and sidearms and no context. Negative immediate. I am exiting area. That part at least I did right. Back at the truck, I locked doors, started engine, and kept lights off for 10 seconds so I could watch tree edges without glare. Nothing moved. When I finally turned onto County Road, I checked mirrors every 5 seconds until the station lights appeared. Inside, under fluorescent hum and peeling safety posters, I wrote the incident twice. One version in my notebook with words I'd never put on official paper. Not bear, not man, not dog, too tall, too deliberate watching angles. The other in proper format for systems built to absorb anomalies without changing shape. Large unidentified predator observed in moonlit clearing exhibiting atypical bipedal stance and lateral stride length inconsistent with known local species. I read the official version and felt like I was lying while telling the truth. At 2:14 a.m., I sat alone in the station break room with stale crackers and cold coffee and tried to explain what I'd seen in a way that would let me sleep. Maybe moonlight stretched proportions. Maybe overlapping shadows built a false silhouette. Maybe adrenaline edited movement into something impossible. Maybe I was underslept, overfocused, and primed to pattern match threat. Maybe. I repeated every maybe until the words turned thin and meaningless. When dawn finally bled gray through the narrow station windows, I hadn't convinced myself of anything except this. Whatever was out there understood distance, cover, and timing better than anything I'd tracked in 7 years. And I was already in its routine. Dawn came and went in strips of gray, and I went through the motions of a normal shift, like muscle memory could carry a mind that had already split in two. At 5:20, I unlocked the station, switched on the radio stack, and pretended the fluorescent buzz was enough to keep anything bad outside. I logged weather. I checked trail advisories. I made weak coffee and drank half of it cold while reading and rereading my own incident notes, until the words blurred into static. Todd came in around 8, saw my face, and asked if I'd slept. Some, I lied. He skimmed the official report, stopped at upright locomotion observed, and gave me that careful manager look people use when they're trying not to say you need a break in a way that sounds like you're becoming a problem. You did right calling it in, he said. Tonight you stay on main corridors, no freelancing. I nodded because arguing takes energy, and I had none. By late afternoon, I'd convinced myself that if I could get one clean data point, one image, one print cast with scale, one fur sample I could bag and tag, I could force this back into the world of solvable things. That was the lie I told myself to keep moving. Predators I understood, hoaxes I understood. Even being wrong, I understood. But what I'd seen near the snow fence line was a shape that made my training feel decorative. So just before dusk, I broke Todd's instruction by exactly one spur road and told myself that didn't count. The locked Fire Road gate off County 17 sat in a shallow dip where fog pooled early. Gravel shoulder, rusted hinge, old reflective strips gone dull with salt and years. I killed my lights, listened. Nothing. No coyote talk, no wings, not even squirrel chatter. The silence had that same evacuated quality from Cedar Split, like the whole woods had stepped back from something I couldn't see. I did what I always did. Checked gate chain, scanned tree line, marked time. When I turned to get back in the truck, my own headlights flashed against something on the far side of the gate. At first I thought it was a downed branch caught upright, one of those forked maple trunks that catches weird angles in light. Then it shifted and the fork became shoulders. It was less than 20 feet away, not fully broadside, not fully frontal. Wrong angle glimpses stitched together in strobe as my hands shook on the wheel and the beam bounced. I saw a snout, long and narrow at the bridge, then heavier at the jaw. Fur dark with lighter streaks, where it had matted into rope-like strips. I saw one ear pinned flat, triangular and ragged at the edge like old frostbite or torn cartilage. I saw teeth, not in a clean bite line, but in flashes between lips, pulled too tight, as if the mouth was set in a permanent half-snarl or scar tissue had changed how it closed. Then I saw what made my stomach drop, like an elevator cable had snapped. Its forelimb came up and closed around the steel gatepost. Closed. Not pressed, not pawed, wrapped. The digits were long enough to curl past halfway, each ending in dark points that clicked once against metal. Thumb-like opposition, or close enough that my brain couldn't file it under any local species without feeling dishonest. The wrist joint rolled as it shifted weight, controlled and deliberate, and the elbow sat too high for a bear's front leg articulation. No stumbling, no blind animal panic in light. It used the post like a person uses a handrail. I forgot to breathe. Every hair on my arms and neck stood up so hard it hurt. My mouth flooded metallic and I tasted pennies. My legs wanted to run, but run where? I was in the cab, door closed, and still my body screamed, "Move now," with that old mammal urgency you don't negotiate with. The thing leaned toward the headlights and the beam caught its eyes. Not the pale rise and dim I'd seen before, but a hard white gold reflection set deep under a brow ridge, focused and steady. Looking at me, not at light, at me. I jammed the truck into reverse. Tires spun, grabbed, lurched me back 6 feet. The thing dropped in one fluid collapse from upright to a forward angled lope. Knuckles or the front digits touching gravel for 2 beats before it crossed left out of beam. The speed was obscene because it wasn't frantic. It was efficient. I threw the truck forward, clipped my mirror on the gate chain, and fishtailed onto County Road hard enough that tools in the bed slammed side to side like thrown bricks. I drove with both hands welded to the wheel and kept waiting for impact on the rear quarter panel, for weight to hit the tailgate, for claws through glass. Nothing came. Nothing had to. It had already shown me enough. Back at station lot lights, engine idling, I realized I was crying and hadn't noticed when it started. I wrote the encounter in block print because cursive turned into jagged nonsense. Partial visual at locked gate, long rostrum, pinna laid back, manual grasp behavior observed on steel post, drop to lope transition for contact on substrate. I stared at the phrase manual grasp behavior for a full minute and laughed once, sharp and ugly, because there is no checkbox for what I had just seen. After that night, the line between patrol and being patrolled disappeared. The first sign was small enough I almost talked myself out of it. My station locker had a habit. The right door stuck, unless you lifted and pulled. Everybody in North District knew that. One morning it opened on the first try, easy as a kitchen cabinet. Inside, my spare gloves were on the top shelf instead of the middle. My folded laminated district map was gone. I tore through the locker room, the truck, the station desk. Nothing. I asked Todd if he'd borrowed it. Nope, check supply. Supply had 2 old maps, both outdated and neither mine. Todd blamed clutter. I blamed sleep deprivation. At lunch, I found my map in my truck bed under the emergency blanket, soaked, folded wrong, with a smear of mud across the Shale Creek corridor where I'd been extending loops. I did not tell anyone that part. 2 nights later at the cabin, I came home to find the porch motion light unscrewed and hanging by its wires. No footprints on the dry leaves, no pry marks on the 1-bedroom door. Inside, nothing stolen. Wallet where I left it. Laptop untouched. But my one good flashlight, the one Naomi had given me almost a year earlier when we were still pretending opposite schedules weren't a relationship killer, was gone from the kitchen counter. I searched every room twice, then a 3rd time with all the lights off, as if darkness would reveal what daylight hid. At 2 a.m., I found the flashlight standing upright against the back step outside, lens pointed at the tree line. Batteries removed and set in a straight row beside it. I stood there in socks in 33-degree air and felt a cold settle under my skin that had nothing to do with weather. The next day I called Naomi. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Hey, you okay?" "No," I said, because lying takes effort and I was fresh out. I told her enough to sound sane and not enough to sound like I was asking her to carry what I couldn't hold. She listened in that quiet way she always had, then said, "Come down here for a few nights. Just sleep where there are people. I can't just abandon district." "You're not abandoning anything. You're asking for backup." I asked, then asked louder. I promised I would. We both knew promise and action were different species. At station, I pushed Todd for paired patrols in edge hours. He rubbed his face, pointed at staffing board, said what supervisors always say when they're trying to keep a system from collapsing. I don't have bodies. We're down 2 seasonal hires and 1 out on comp leave. I can keep you on daylight for a bit. Daylight didn't matter. Whatever this was worked low visibility and transition. I said so. He gave me a long look. Jasper, I need you to hear me. You're good at this job. But right now you're running hot. File your anomalies, stay on protocol, and stop going out alone after dark unless dispatch sends you. That should have been enough. It should have shut it down. Instead, I started finding signs that didn't fit coincidence and didn't fit prank either. Fresh scrape marks appeared on bark at shoulder height along roots only I'd been checking. Not random. Spaced like waypoints. Twice I found deer carcasses untouched except for opened abdominal cavity and organs removed with almost surgical neatness. No drag marks, no scavenger mess. A trail cam I hid 15 feet off trail came back with 97 blank frames, then 1 image at 1:43 a.m. Not the creature, just my own truck parked at Cedar Split from a previous evening. Shot from an angle the camera physically couldn't see unless it had been moved and put back. The county deputies got a copy of that image over break room coffee. Older one squinted, handed it back, and said, "Could be kids messing with you." "With steel tools and night vision?" I asked. He shrugged. "Could be." Could be became everyone's favorite phrase. Could be vandals, could be poachers, could be your imagination, could be stress, could be didn't explain why I started hearing one low huff behind me at different locations exactly when I stopped moving, like a check-in. Could be didn't explain why one morning my name tag, normally clipped to my station vest, turned up hanging from a balsam branch 10 feet inside tree line at Cedar Split. Bent backward, pin clasp broken from force instead of unclipped. That was when the prey realization stopped being metaphor. Predators test boundaries. They map response times. They learn routines. So do people. Whatever I was dealing with did both. It knew my truck. It knew my routes. It knew where I lived. One evening after sundown, I sat in the cabin with every light off and watched the tree line through the open blackout curtains I'd started leaving that way, so nothing could stand outside unseen. At 11:17, something touched the siding once. Slow scrape, like nails dragged lightly down vinyl. Not enough to damage, enough to notify. I grabbed the flare gun and held position by the bedroom wall until dawn. I never called 911. What would I say? Something that stands like a man and runs like a wolf and uses my own schedule against me, keeps visiting. But only when it chooses angles no one else can verify. I started carrying the flare gun off shift anyway. By mid-November, I was living in 2 incompatible realities. In one, I was Ranger Duskwalker, 7 years in North District, experienced, methodical, assigned Unit 3, good under pressure, reliable with trail families and storm cleanup and paperwork that made patterns visible. In the other, I was an animal being narrowed. I stopped running errands after dusk, stopped taking trash to the barrel after dark, parked under the station floodlight even on clear nights. I kept a radio on scan at home and woke at every static pop. Sleep came in 20-minute drops, then snapped off with adrenaline spikes I couldn't control. I began to pre-plan exits from every room, every pull-off, every maintenance shed. That kind of vigilance doesn't feel like fear in the moment. It feels like logistics. Then your hands start shaking when you try to button a cuff, and you realize fear has just been wearing a uniform, help kept failing in boring, bureaucratic ways that somehow hurt worse than mockery. Dispatch could log what I reported, but without a direct threat to civilians or visual confirmation by a second unit, law enforcement response stayed low priority. Wildlife office in the next district told me they'd keep an eye on trends. Todd shifted me to more visitor-facing tasks for a week. Trailhead presence, safety talks, parking checks, trying to keep me visible and paired. I appreciated the intent. It also meant I spent daylight smiling at families while calculating how fast I could clear each lot if something came out of timber before sunset. Linda noticed first. "You look peaked, honey," she said, tightening her scarf at Cedar Split. "You taking care of yourself?" "Trying," I said. Marty stopped joking about coyotes and asked if I wanted him to carry a whistle on his mushroom lines. The nursing students started texting station before and after their Wednesday 6-mile loop without being asked. Quiet accommodations from people who sensed weather changing, even if they couldn't name the storm. Then 3 cameras failed within 48 hours again. New batteries, different batches, same result. Full charge to dead, as if drained in one pull. 1 unit simply disappeared from a tree 15 feet up. We found the steel bracket 2 days later twisted open and set on the trail center line like a coin on a rail. Todd finally said, "Okay, we pull back from night checks unless absolutely necessary." For 48 hours we did. On the 3rd day, dispatch pinged a maintenance alert from the old access path near the drainage run by the cut block. One of our remaining active cams had gone dark and stopped transmitting. Last known frame timestamp was 2041. Location was just beyond the locked fire road gate where I'd gotten the partial view. I told Todd I'd grab it first thing at dawn with another unit. At 6:10 a.m., the next morning freezing drizzle started and turned county roads into soap. Paired response got bumped by a downed line call South District. Then a missing hunter report came in from another sector, and every available body with field clearance got retasked. By afternoon, the weather cleared. By then, everyone was committed until late. "Leave it till tomorrow," Todd said. I looked at the map. That camera had been in a corridor between Shale Creek movement and the maintenance spur where sign kept concentrating. If something was disabling units on rhythm, waiting another night meant losing whatever evidence remained. Maybe that was ego. Maybe that was desperation dressed as duty. Maybe I just couldn't stand one more day of being told to wait, while the thing that had learned me kept writing the schedule. "I can do a quick grab," I said. "In and out 30 minutes. Radio check every 10. Todd hesitated long enough I almost backed down. Then he exhaled. "Check in at departure, on arrival, on exit. If anything feels off, you leave. No hero work." I said yes to all of it and left at 9:02 p.m. alone. The drive out felt like entering a vacuum. County road empty. No porch lights near the old quarry bend. Clouds low enough to erase moon. My headlights tunneled through mist and gave me only what was 10 yards ahead. I parked at the pullout by the gate and did a full circle scan with handheld. No eye shine, no movement. Just drip off branches and the thin ticking sound of cooling engine metal. I keyed dispatch. "Unit 3 on site, beginning retrieval. Copy, Unit 3, 10-minute check." I clipped radio high on my vest, flare gun at belt, bear spray on left strap, and stepped past the gate with one light on flood, one on spot, because redundancy had become religion. The access path bent shallow right toward the drainage and camera tree. Mud held edges from last week's freeze, ruts crusted and slick. I found the camera within 6 minutes, mounted where I'd left it, lens intact, status light dead. I opened housing, battery pack warm, not low, warm. As if it had just been running hard. I felt that same old prickling at the back of my neck and turned my light in a slow arc. Timber, brush, empty path. I took the SD card, pocketed it, and started back. Halfway to the gate, my radio cracked. Unit 3, comm check. Copy, en route to vehicle, I said, and heard my own voice come back too tight. Then the woods answered with a single low huff from somewhere left of path, close enough to feel in my ribs more than hear. I did not run. Running invites chase. Every training module says it, and training is what you cling to when instinct wants to bolt blind. I walked faster. Light steady, scan left, right, ahead, back. Another sound behind me now. Scrape of weight on bark, controlled, descending. When I reached the gate line, relief hit so hard my knees weakened for 1 stupid second. Then my beam found the truck. Both front tires were down to rims, sidewalls cut in long, clean slashes, not punctures, slices, the kind that open like mouths. I froze, then swung light to the access road. A birch lay across it at an angle, trunk thick as a telephone pole. Fresh splinter at the base, where it had been pushed or levered over from the ditch. It had not been there when I arrived 30 minutes earlier. I would have seen it in headlights. No way around on either side without burying an axle in drainage muck. Dispatch called again, voice tinny through static. Unit 3, status? I keyed up and got nothing but hiss. I switched channels. Hiss, switch to emergency. 1 burst, then dead carrier. Behind me from the tree line near the cut block came the sound of brush parting in measured steps, unhurried, heavy, closing. I stood between a locked gate, a disabled truck, and black timber that had already decided where I could and couldn't go. And for the first time in 7 years wearing this patch, I understood with perfect clarity that there was nowhere left to retreat that it hadn't already accounted for. I wish I could tell you I did something brave first. What I did first was inventory. Gate chain, locked, center posted, no bolt cutters. Truck, crippled, both front tires gone, road blocked by birch. Timber behind me, occupied. Radio degraded, maybe dead. Distance to open county road on foot if I doubled back through trees. Too long and dark with unknown pursuit. Nearest hard cover. Truck body, gate post, drainage ditch. My hands were steady, which scared me more than shaking would have. Steady meant my body had gone past panic and into procedure. I moved to the passenger side of the truck and crouched low behind the front quarter panel, keeping the gate in my peripheral and the tree line in my light. I thumbed my handheld down to narrow beam, then killed it for 1 second just to read ambient. Black. No moon. Low cloud. Mist hanging waist high over the cut block, beyond the ditch. Then it moved. At first I saw only my displacement. A section of brush flattening without wind, then rebounding in a line like something heavy passing through in controlled bursts. No crashing, no wild break and charge, just deliberate weight, placed where it meant to place it. The way a person walks in a dark room they've memorized. I clicked my light back on and swept left to right. The beam caught trunks, slash piles, birch bark, nothing else. I held still and counted to 5. The brush stopped moving. A low chuff came from 10 feet inside tree line. Left this time, not where I'd just seen motion. It had circled while I tracked the wrong spot. My scalp went cold. I backed until my shoulder blades touched the locked gate and raised the flare gun in my right hand, bear spray in my left. I'm not built for two-weapon heroics. The setup felt stupid even as I did it. But I knew one thing from every near sighting. If it committed to a rush, I would get one chance to make it reconsider. Maybe two. The old floodlight mounted above the gate was tied to a motion sensor and a battery box for maintenance crews. Usually it tripped for deer and annoyed everyone. Tonight it hadn't kicked on. Maybe from mist. Maybe from angle. I leaned and slapped the steel panel with my elbow, hard. The sensor popped. White light blasted across the open cut for 10, maybe 12 yards before dying into timber shadow, and it stepped into that wash like it had been waiting for exactly that. People ask what it looked like as if there's a clean sentence for it. There isn't. There's what my eyes saw and what my brain refused for a half second, then accepted because refusing would have killed me. It stood upright when it entered the light, and upright it was close to 8 feet. Not guessing from fear, not felt huge. I mean 8 feet against a known gate height and the marked post beside it. Digitigrade legs, hock joint high and backward angled, built for spring but carrying weight with unnerving control. The torso was the part that looked most wrong if you wanted categories. Deep chest like a man's, with heavy pectoral mass under fur. Shoulders broad and high set, waist narrower but not lean. Thick through the trunk, old power thick. The kind you see in logging horses and powerlifters, not wild canids. Its head was wolf-shaped in architecture but oversized for anything native here. Long muzzle, nasal bridge ridged. Ears laid back tight to the skull and ragged at edges like healed tears. Fur was dark charcoal to brown-black, clumped wet in places, matted in ropey strips along flank and neck. Under the fur I could see scars, old white seams crossing shoulder and rib cage, one puckered patch near the sternum where hair grew thin and uneven. It had been in fights, many, and had survived all of them. Its forelimbs hung long enough that when it shifted weight forward, the knuckles brushed gravel. Not paws, not hands like ours either, something in between. Elongated metacarpals, thick finger-like digits with black hooked nails, flexing independently around tension. I had seen one of those grips on the gatepost before. Under floodlight, there was no denying it now. The eyes did what they'd done every other time. White gold reflection that didn't behave like normal shine, bright, then dimmer, as if the intensity could throttle. They fixed on me with focus I've only ever seen in primates and very smart dogs, tracking not just movement but intent. It looked at the flare gun, then at my left hand, then back to my face. It knew tools. Maybe not what they were called, but what they did. Its mouth opened a few inches. Teeth showed in layered rows. Not extra rows like stories, just too many too visible because the lips pulled high and the gums sat long. Canines heavy, premolars serrated looking in that light. Breath fogged once, slow. It took one step into full open, then another sideways, testing angle. Each stride covered almost the width of the maintenance path. It kept the ditch between us as long as it could, forcing me to pivot and expose my flank if I wanted to keep it centered. Intelligent fast. Exactly what I'd written in my private notes and hated myself for writing. I remember a stupid thought arriving clear as a bell. It has done this before. Then it lowered, not all the way, just enough to load its legs. That was the commitment cue I fired. The flare left with a violent punch and a white-red trail that turned the mist to blood color. At this range, I couldn't miss center mass. It struck high in the chest fur just left of sternum, embedded for a fraction of a second, then bounced and dropped, still burning, into slash grass. The sound it made when that flare hit was not a roar. It was a compressed, furious bark scream that drilled straight through my head and into my teeth. It recoiled, one arm slashing across its chest, and I stepped in with the spray because hesitation there equals getting run over. I thumbed the safety and dumped a full fan of bear spray at face height and wider than my instincts wanted. Left to right sweep, then high center, turning my own head to avoid blowback. Orange mist bloomed under floodlight. Some hit it. I know because it snapped its muzzle away and thrashed, pawing eyes. But not enough. It lunged blind and clipped me anyway, a glancing rake that tore fabric at my right shoulder and spun me sideways into the gatepost. Pain came hot and delayed. My jacket opened from collarbone to scapula, like someone ran a knife through canvas an inch off skin. If it had landed full, this story ends there. I dropped the spent flare gun, kept the spray, and did the one thing my body did not want. I moved down, not away. There was a drainage culvert under the access road 6 yards to my right, half hidden by grass and dark water runoff, maybe 3 feet in diameter. I'd stepped over it 100 times on daylight checks and never once thought, escape route. Now it was the only geometry it couldn't exploit with stride length. I dove feet first into muck, twisted to shoulders, and jammed myself into corrugated metal as gravel and cold water punched through my uniform. Behind me, something hit the culvert mouth hard enough to ring it like a bell. Claws scraped steel with a high shriek that made my stomach flip. It thrust an arm in up to elbow, nails gouging grooves, inches from my boot sole. Then withdrew and struck again from a different angle, trying to hook, learning dimensions in real time. I crawled. Not graceful crawling, panic crawl, elbows and knees and slurry, chest compressed, pack snagging on ridges. Bear spray canister banged forward ahead of me, each shove. The culvert stank of iron water and rot, every sound magnified. My breath, my jacket scraping, impacts behind me as it tested top and side, then went quiet. The quiet was worse. At midpoint, I killed my light and kept moving by touch, because illumination at the far opening would paint me like a target. My radio, clipped high, was pressed between chest and metal, digging into sternum. I fumbled it free with numb fingers and hit emergency beacon without trying to speak. If carrier was dead, beacon might still burst on priority frequency. Might. The unit gave one chirp, then nothing. I hit it again. No chirp this time. I heard footfalls above me on the road, heavy, measured, parallel to my progress. It was pacing the culvert from overhead, matching speed. Predators chase lines. I could not give it one. When I reached the far mouth, I did not pop out and sprint open. I slid into ditch water, stayed low, and cut immediately left into cattails instead of taking the obvious game trail to County Road. Water hit thigh, then hip. 33-degree air bit through wet clothes like glass. I pushed through reeds bent double, using my forearms to part silently, angling downwind if my weather red was right. Break visual, break scent, break prediction. Behind me at the culvert exit, brush exploded. It had either doubled back and triangulated or simply outran me around the road edge. A huff burst close enough to make cattails shiver. I froze, chest deep in black water with mud sucking my boots. and listened to it quarter the bank in short arcs, stopping every few seconds. Not random. Search pattern. I clicked the radio beacon again under my chin, shielding it with my hand, like that could help electronics by force of will. This time, faint under static, I heard the emergency tone return to me once, clipped and ugly. Then dispatch, far and broken. 3. If transmitting, activate strobe. Signal dropped. I had no strobe. I had one pen light and one ruined plan, so I did the only light trick left. I took my secondary flashlight, set it to highest constant, and wedged it upright in mud 20 feet to my right. Beam aimed into open drainage. Then I belly crawled left and forward through cattails until my ribs screamed. 10 seconds later, the thing charged the light. It hit where the beam stood with a crash, and a guttural snarl, swatting, biting, committing force to an object that did not bleed. I used that noise to gain distance, crawling then, crouch running through muck until the cattails thinned, and I found the old maintenance berm. From there I moved in broken diagonals, 5 yards, pause, listen, change direction, toward where County Road should be. The first human light I saw wasn't a flashlight. It was a rotating white search beam, sweeping treetops from the road shoulder, then dropping in arcs. Then another from opposite angle. Volunteer fire and SR rigs run those portable mast lights. I'd helped train people to use them on missing hiker callouts. Seeing them now felt like witnessing civilization re-enter a map where it had been erased. I keyed the radio and screamed into static anyway. Unit 3, at the drainage south side. Don't come in alone. For 2 beats, nothing. Then clear enough to hurt. Unit 3, hold position. Lights on you in 20. The creature heard that too. The brush line 50 yards back convulsed once as it pivoted. Under sweeping beams, I caught a final fragment. Shoulder and head profile at the timber edge. Chest fur scorched where flare hit, one eye flashing and dimming as it turned. It did not bolt in panic. It withdrew in stages using trunks, choosing shadow bands between search arcs, and disappeared uphill as if a switch had cut it from the scene. By the time deputies and volunteers reached me, I had lost fine control in my hands and couldn't feel my right ear, except for a needle whine from the flare blast. Someone wrapped me in 2 wool blankets and kept asking orienting questions. Name, date, where pain. I answered all of them and then threw up ditch water and bile onto my own boots. They wanted to transport me straight to county ER. I refused first pass and said, "Station evidence report." Old habits die loud. One deputy, same older guy, who'd looked at my photo weeks earlier and gone quiet, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You can report after you stop shaking, Ranger." I made it to North District Station at 3:12 a.m. Inside fluorescent light, everything looked staged and false. The coffee maker sat cold. The map board still had last week's closure tags. My locker door was half open from where I'd rushed out at 9:02 like this was routine. I stripped my outer jacket and saw the claw tears. 4 long diagonal cuts across the shoulder panel, deep enough to fray insulation, shallow enough that skin underneath showed only red pressure tracks and 1 pinpoint bleed. Less than an inch of fabric had been the difference between telling this and being evidence for someone else's report. My right ear kept ringing. Speech on that side came muffled and far away. Hypothermia, shakes hit in waves so hard, I had to brace both palms on the intake counter to stay upright. I vomited again in the utility sink behind dispatch desk. then sat on the floor with my back to the locked interior door and would not move until sunrise painted the window over the radio console gray. Todd came in just before 6, took one look at me and stopped talking mid-sentence. I handed him the SD card in a nitrile evidence bag and the dead warm battery pack wrapped in my hat so I wouldn't lose it. Chain of custody, I said, because language was easier than meaning. He crouched to eye level. Jasper, did it touch you? Jacket only. Do you need an ambulance now? I need this logged before someone decides I had a nightmare. He didn't argue. For that, I'll always give him credit. I filed 2 documents that morning. The first was official. Incident report. Hazard escalation. Equipment sabotage. Officer safety concern. I wrote it in the driest terms I could tolerate because I knew exactly what certain words do to credibility. I deleted wolf-headed, deleted hands, deleted hunted me. I replaced all of it with large unidentified predator exhibiting atypical bipedal locomotion and advanced avoidance behavior. I listed sequence, times, gear used, environmental conditions, injuries, witness response, and recommended immediate closure radius around the gate and drainage run. The second document was private and ugly honest. Every detail I could remember before fatigue sanded it down. Gate mechanics, eye behavior under changing light, response latency to flare, spray efficacy, tactical repositioning, route prediction, parallel pacing over culvert. I included my mistakes too. Going alone, waiting too long to beacon, assuming the truck was viable egress. By noon, official channels had already started their quiet friction. County deputies took statements and photographed the vehicle. Tire slashes were clean, but not tool-specific enough to satisfy criminal prosecution on their own. Fallen birch could be argued as storm-damaged, despite clear leverage marks. My jacket got bagged, then unbagged, then temporarily retained pending review. The SD card from the retrieved camera contained mostly corrupted files and static frames. One image at 2041 showed motion blur at edge of frame and what analysts later called indeterminate artifact. The battery tested abnormal discharge, but inconclusive cause. Inconclusive is bureaucracy's favorite tranquilizer dart. By end of week, my report had been downgraded to an internal anomaly memo, not falsified, not erased, just filed into a category that generates meetings instead of action. Todd told me this in his office with the door closed and his tie pulled loose, like he'd aged 10 years in 5 days. They're authorizing temporary restricted access out there, he said, and they're recommending you take accumulated leave. Language is reset and recovery. Because I got attacked? Because you were in a high-stress event and we can't corroborate species ID? I laughed once and it came out like a cough. Right, species ID? He looked at me over folded hands. Off the record, I believe you encountered something. On the record, I need words that survive legal review. That sentence taught me more about institutional loneliness than any horror ever could. Naomi drove up the next evening with a duffel bag, groceries, and the expression people wear when they're trying not to show fear at your front door. She stayed 3 nights at my cabin, made soup, took my keys when I reached for them at dusk, sat on the porch with me in full dark, even though I could tell every creak in the trees made her shoulders rise. We tried briefly to be us again. Trauma has a way of faking intimacy. Shared crisis feels like closeness until the adrenaline drains, and what remains is incompatibility in new clothes. I turned every grocery run into route analysis, every restaurant seat into line-of-sight decision. If she suggested a weekend walk, I asked about exits, cell-dead zones, nearest lit road, second vehicle. Once, at a county fair, a generator backfired and I dropped to one knee behind a trash barrel before I knew I'd moved. She stood over me with cotton candy in one hand and grief in both eyes. "I can't be your perimeter alarm," she said later, gently, not cruel. "And you can't live like everything is about to come out of the trees." But for me, everything was. She left before Thanksgiving. We still text on birthdays and sometimes during snowstorms. That's what survived. Within 2 months, I requested reassignment away from solo backcountry patrol. No medical drama, no public statement. Just forms, signatures, a salary adjustment that moved the decimal the wrong direction, and a new posting at a state park farther south focused on visitor safety education and front country operations. Lower pay. Better lights. I sold the cabin. Didn't fight for price. I couldn't do one more night hearing pines, brush siding and wondering if it was wind or weight. I moved into a duplex near town, 1 block off a 4-lane, where headlights pass until late and the sodium street lamps hum all night. My unit has neighbors on both sides, and a dog that barks at delivery trucks with democratic enthusiasm. I sleep better with that noise than I ever did with silence. I changed routines in ways people call overkill until they're the ones alone at a trailhead after dusk. Thus, I do not hike alone. Ever. I carry a radio, a thermal monocular, and 2 independent light sources minimum. If one fails, I do not negotiate. I exit. I don't work dusk to dawn shifts anymore. I turned down 2 promotions because both would have put me back in remote sectors with solo responsibility. My truck gets parked nose out under light, full tank, tires checked by hand before every shift. I keep spare batteries in Faraday pouches because I got tired of being told drain events were probably consumer defects. Co-workers sorted themselves without anyone asking. One camp treated me like damaged glass. Soft voices, fewer assignments, eyes sliding away when conversation approached November. Another camp treated me like a liar who learned a good story and wrote it to easier duty. They made jokes in break rooms when they thought I couldn't hear. I could, even with one ear still not fully right in crowded rooms. The quiet third camp mattered most. Those were the people who caught me by supply closets or at gas pumps and said things like, "I heard pacing outside station 2 years ago and never filed it," or "We had a camera come back warm and dead near Alpena. Told myself it was nothing." They never used big words. They never asked for details in groups. They just nodded once like we were swapping weather reports no one else had language for. Linda still hikes. Marty still mushrooms. The nursing students graduated sent a card to North District that said, "Thanks for always writing down our plate, even when we rolled our eyes." People move on. Trails stay. Patterns return, then break, then return again. As for the gate at the old access path, officially it was closed for infrastructure hazard review for most of winter. By spring, the sign changed to routine maintenance advisory. Public memory is short when nothing dramatic happens on camera. Present day, I'm still in Michigan. Still technically a ranger. Most weekends I stand in front of families at a trail kiosk with laminated maps and teach the least cinematic things in the world. Water planning, turnaround times, weather windows, why cotton kills in shoulder season, why your phone is not a rescue plan. I do bear talks for school groups. I teach kids how to identify poison ivy, and adults how to admit they're lost before sunset. On my safety slide deck, leave before dark is in bold, all caps, no apology. I do not tell campfire stories. I do not say Dogman. I do not claim certainty about species, origin, or folklore. I say this instead. There are behaviors in wild systems we do not fully map, and arrogance gets people hurt faster than ignorance. I go to trauma counseling twice a month in a clinic with fake ficus plants and a waiting room TV always tuned to home renovation shows. My therapist says hypervigilance is a nervous system trying to keep a promise it cannot keep forever. We work on reducing threat scanning in safe environments. Some days it helps. Some days a slammed car door puts me back at the gate with mist in my teeth. I sleep with blackout curtains open. People think that sentence is backwards until I explain. I need to see outside when I wake. Total black sends me searching for movement that might not exist. Streetlight glow and visible yard line calm me. Predictable shadows are kinder than blank ones. In my hall closet, there's a locked hard case with copies of everything. Reports, photos, dispatch logs, battery test printouts, my private notes, and the jacket shoulder with 4 diagonal tiers sealed in evidence plastic after county released it. I don't show it to the public. Not because I'm hiding some revelation, but because evidence without institutional backing becomes entertainment. And I refuse to turn that night into content. Do I think it's dead? Gone? Unique? I don't know. I know it displaced wildlife and patterns before I saw it. I know it learned my routes, my timing, my habits. I know it manipulated distance and line of sight better than most people I've trained with. I know a flare to the chest and capsaicin to the face bought me seconds, not safety. I know searchlights and multiple responders changed the equation enough for me to walk out. And I know surviving once is not the same thing as being safe forever. That's the part people don't like. They want endings with fences. Monster dead. Lesson learned. Hero healed. Real endings are administrative. They are reassignment forms and rent deposits and relearning how to buy groceries without mapping exits first. They are friends who believe you quietly and institutions that don't know what to do with your nouns. They are standing at a trailhead on a bright Saturday, smiling at a kid with a borrowed compass, while one corner of your mind still tracks every tree line by reflex. I still love the woods. That may be the strangest truth in all of this. I love winter light on tamarack and cedar smell after rain and the way children go silent the first time they hear a barred owl answer itself across water. I still believe public land should stay public, and that fear should never be the only story we tell about wild places. But I also believe in partners, radios, redundant light, and leaving before dark. If you've made it this far because you wanted me to name what I saw, I can't give you a name I trust. If you've made it this far because something in your own logs doesn't add up, then hear me clearly. Write it down anyway. Use boring words if you have to. Keep copies. Tell someone specific. Don't go back alone to prove you're not scared. Scared is information. Use it. At 5:20 some mornings, when my current station coffee machine starts its throat-clearing rattle, I still think about North District and that gate and the second the floodlight came alive. I think about those eyes dimming as if by choice. Then I unlock the front door, step into whatever weather we got, and do the work in daylight.